In this next segment, we're going to talk about buying off market and why it's important to have representation. You know, there's a lot of people who are going out there and they're just sending letters to everybody in a neighborhood or talking to their neighbor, or they hear of a good deal that's happening, something before it hits the market, and they're trying to make those deals happen without representation. And I hear so many horror stories of people who are trying to make deals with each other and then something goes, catastrophically wrong. A basement's leaking, a foundation's cracked, there's a beam split, all kinds of things can go wrong. So really getting that extra set of eyes on the home is really going to help you. And there's some things that you may not know about how representation can help you buy off market. Right now I have Missy Buttrum from Homewire Realty. And when we talk about off market, first let's set the table. What is buying off market and what does that look like?
Off market most commonly is your for sale by owner, or we call them FSBOs, FSBO. And that's happening more and more with the seller's market that's going on. People are listing their homes by themselves with no one helping them. And then buyers are seeing those maybe on Facebook Market, or Zillow has a section for sale by owner, Craigslist. So that's typically the off-market sale. You also have, as I've mentioned in other episodes, the Sell 911 company of mine, where we do acquisitions and we're looking for those homes that people don't want to list. They have too many repairs, or they just want a quick cash sale, and I'm getting that kind of inventory as well. Those are all considered off market.
And that can happen if somebody, let's say that they had somebody pass in the family and they inherit a house, or they somehow acquire that house. And a lot of times those houses are pretty old. I see them in my neighborhood over in Tosa, and those houses are in pretty rough shape. Some of them still have dirt driveways.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And the house is in pretty disrepair. And so they just want to offload it, and they don't want to do all that stuff. And so that would be an example of off market. Another example of off market is some people just don't want 50 people walking through their house.
Exactly.
Right? Especially during a pandemic.
Especially because of that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So off market exists, and I've seen neighbors talk to neighbors. Have you done anything where you've done any canvassing of neighborhoods?
Yes. I've actually done letters out for my buyers that are looking in certain areas. I will canvass market areas that they're interested in, specific neighborhoods. That, hey, I actually have a buyer, legit buyer, because sometimes people think it's just marketing material.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll let me use their picture. This family is looking for a home in this neighborhood. Are you considering selling? Give me a call. And
that is appealing to a lot of sellers, because a seller may have a new job that they're acquiring, and the advantage for the seller is that they can reduce the steps and just make something happen. The advantage for the buyer is that they can shop in their neighborhood, not for what's available, and maybe find a better home than they thought of in the beginning. So let's say there's a Craigslist, there is a FSBO, there's my neighbor selling a house. We talk about representation and protection, but really, why do you need a realtor for this purchase? Why can't we just do the deal on our own?
Well, great question. And this is something that I have dealt with actually more and more often. And usually it seems like it's working with my established buyers already, that we've been out looking at homes. They ask my opinion and what they need to do to get into that home. Do they need me to come with them? So it comes up quite a bit. And yes, definitely need that representation, because things can just unravel and fall apart quickly. What I do is I establish that relationship with the seller. I personally call the seller, talk to them, find out if they have offers, tell them I have a buyer interested in seeing it, set it up just like we normally would if it was on MLS, but I'm talking to the seller directly.
Mm-hmm. So having that representation, and then also you have a trained eye. So when you go into there might be a reason that it's not listed with an agent.
Yes.
They might have some demons in the basement, like a cracked foundation or something, and you're going to be there to see it.
Right.
Which is going to really protect that buyer.
Right. They do need that second set of eyes to protect them of those things, see other issues that might be going on, make sure that if an offer is written between the two of them, it's a legit legal offer, and that contingencies and things like that are written on it, just like we would a normal MLS sale.
Yeah, because if you're doing earnest money and you're giving them lots of money, there could be a scam in there. Like they might say,
yes.
I'm selling it on my own, but you got to give me $10,000 earnest money, and they don't actually own the house and they take off to Puerto Rico or something. So, I think an important part is your eyes are neutral. You're not enamored with the idea of moving into a house. As a home buyer, I'm going to move in and I'm going to see the kitchen.
Yeah.
I'm going to see my kids in the room. I'm going to see the backyard barbecue. I'm going to be enamored by the beautiful neighborhood and all of these things. And my blinders are going to be on.
Tunnel vision. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to see that crack in the basement. I'm not going to see that old water heater. I'm not going to see those things. So that's where you come in.
Exactly.
And you're really that neutral set of eyes that helps see those things. That's really important. And that is so important to have. Last week, we talked about the steps in buying a home. And we went through everything from mindset to getting the keys. And if you didn't catch that episode, there'll be a link below where you can see the Home Buying 101 so you can understand the whole process. If we're buying off market, though, Missy, is this process different than what we learned last week, or how does that work?
The basic process is the same. It's just the thing that's different is the matter of how you're finding that home. It's getting a little more creative, whether it's the buyer seeing something online or I'm finding it in my off-market inventory from my husband's company. That part of it is a little different. Another reason it can be different is if you have a buyer's agent helping you, the seller might not always want to pay that buyer's agent their whatever co-broke. 2.4 is common here, but it's 3% in other places. So it's good to have an agreement with your buyer's agent as to what that would cost you as a buyer. What would that cost you to have them represent you? I personally have, I probably have done 10, 12 off-market for sale by owner deals recently, and I was able to negotiate that from the seller and help them with both sides.
I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but if you had a buyer's fee, could that be added on to the mortgage, or do they have to pay that out of pocket?
Yes, we could definitely do that. So let's say they're going to go in at $300,000, and that's what the seller wants. We could write the offer for $302,000, and in the language it would say $2,000 goes to Homewire Realty.
Okay, so it's not like as a home buyer there would be an added expense out of pocket.
No.
It would be something, and that would be normal if the house was listed normally on the
yes.
MLS.
Yep.
As a local agent, you told us a little bit about what you do in our first episode, and you mentioned Sell 911. So how does that resource help buyers buy off market?
Yeah, as I've mentioned in other episodes, for sure. Sell 911 is our acquisition company. It is the way my husband is going out and finding those either distressed, divorce, death in the family, someone's in the nursing home. Met with someone last week where the niece was taking care of the home. She found us on sell911.com and called me to come over and give her a cash offer. So if I had a West Allis buyer, which actually I did have a match for that, that's a great way for me to help those buyers out to find a home that they wouldn't have found on MLS. Mm-hmm. So that's an advantage to my buyers that I work with.
You offer them a whole new inventory
yes.
outside of MLS. So there's the MLS inventory that you can get them access to immediately.
Yes.
They're going to receive notifications right when those things hit MLS. And If you don't know what MLS is, what is MLS?
Multiple listing service, and that's where all the realtors put their listings.
So a house goes on the market, it gets listed, and it's now for sale. It then gets put on the MLS. And so you want to have access to that right away. That's one inventory. This other inventory that you're talking about is completely off market. This is before it's hitting MLS.
My husband's company finding it.
So you're out there knocking on doors, sending letters, talking, networking, making those connections. That's his job, is just to find inventory.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a huge advantage to having success and having an advantage in the market, is finding a unique inventory. Now, is that inventory listed everywhere, or just people who work with you have access to that inventory? This 911 inventory, is that unique to you, or will everybody in the world have access to this?
That will be unique for my buyers.
Okay, so that's a definite advantage of working with you, is having access to this other inventory, and I think that's really powerful. This episode is sponsored by Cell 911, and what's the best way to get a hold of? Do we contact you, or who's the best person to contact to get access to this inventory?
You can contact me via cell phone, text, call me, or email me. Let's talk about if one of these homes would be good for you. Let's have coffee, do a Zoom meeting, whatever is convenient for you. I'd like to talk to you more about how it all works.
I think that's really important, because just because it's a good deal may not mean that it's a good deal for that particular person or couple, depending on where they're at. So definitely connect with Missy and find out if this would be a good fit for you in your situation during your journey. And next week, we're going to talk about new construction, and you have some pretty interesting things, and I can't wait to hear about them. You've probably driven through a neighborhood or been on Craigslist and saw a for sale by owner. They have a fancy sign about 8.5 by 11 out in their front yard with a phone number on it, and they're trying to sell you a really expensive house. Now, I don't know if I want to buy a $350,000 house with a sign this big in front of it, because I like a fancy sign. But what are some of the pitfalls we can run into in buying a for sale by owner house, a FSBO as we call it?
Right. So Abraham Lincoln was once asked, "Isn't it true that you can represent yourself in court?" Mm-hmm. And his response was, "Absolutely, and you can also do your own dentistry." So point being, when you're getting involved in an important, expensive legal process, it's good to have people around who know what they're doing, because they're going to see how these things have gone sideways in the past. They're going to see issues that are specific to your neighborhood or to your situation or to your seller or to your type of property, and they're going to be able to help you navigate through those issues. Whereas if you're doing a for sale by owner, whether you're the seller or the buyer, you're navigating some complicated waters without any guidance.
Have you seen any in your travels houses that are out there that are for sale by owner because they probably couldn't get an agent to represent them, or they're a little shady of a house?
Sure, yeah, and you see a lot of those situations are you're for sale by owner because the owners of the house have so little equity in the home, at least that they believe, that they can't afford to pay a realtor any portion of the proceeds. They need to get it to pay off the proceeds. Mm-hmm. Or in other situations, they just want to maximize their take on it.
Yeah.
But that usually doesn't work out that way.
Yeah. What are some of the things we should look out for? We see it for sale by owner. It looks like a good house. It looks like they're taking care of it. What should we look out for in the for sale by owner, and what are the steps we should take to get that house?
Absolutely. So if you're the buyer, what you want to do is you want to understand that this whole process to this point has not been handled by people who understand what's going on in the real estate sphere. Mm-hmm. At least probably. Maybe the owner's a real estate banker for all we know.
Sure.
But as far as you know, it hasn't been handled that way. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are going to take it upon yourself to get all the professionals involved that you need to get involved to make sure things are done right. Mm-hmm. So that means an inspection professional, that means a realtor professional who can talk about valuation and other issues like that. Mm-hmm. That means a legal professional who can look at easements on the property or other legal matters that affect what you're buying, and then also a mortgage professional. These are all people that are going to be involved in this process. And when you're talking about a for sale by owner, none of those types of people have been consulted. So there might be a big red flag in their world that no one's noticed yet, and you want to be aware of it as soon as possible.
Right. You need to have really good representation if you're going to go into buying any home, and especially if it's a for sale by owner. They're not all, falling apart.
Right.
But there may be a reason why the person is selling it by themselves rather than getting the proper representation. Buying a home's a big deal. You got to have your team behind you. We talked a little bit about the pitfalls. What would be the benefit of, you see that house that's your neighbor's selling, what's the benefit of buying it directly from him with your proper agent and people representing you?
Sure. If you've got the representation on your side, if you've got all the experts in place to know that your questions are answered, one of the big benefits, really the primary benefit that causes people to go that route, is the reduced expense. A realtor is going to take typically a percentage of the sale price of the house as their fee. That's the arrangement we make with realtors when we sell or buy our homes. And you would save that. That's benefit number one. A lot of people believe that benefit number two is it simplifies the process. I can tell you from my experience that typically is not the case.
Yeah.
But in the example you gave, you're buying your father's property or something like that. There are certain family or very close type situations where it would be somewhat overkill to have a realtor involved if we already know all the terms of the arrangement and the professionals are on board as they should be.
I think one of the benefits of having representation on both sides is that you have professionals who are talking the same language. Being a lawyer, you probably have people who are just saying, hey, I want to represent myself, and you have to talk to them, and they have no idea of the process and procedure, and you're trying to tell them this is how things go, and then you have to educate them. And it's the same thing with that for sale by owner. That owner may just be wanting to save money, but they don't know the process, and it's just, there's a lot of steps that are going to go into place. So that's where your team is going to come in. They're going to do that work for you.
Absolutely, and that's a great analogy. I know when I have litigation cases, when I'm in court arguing about cases, and there's an unrepresented party who finally hires an attorney, that's a great sigh of relief for me, because now I have someone who I could talk to and say, hey, this position is out of line, this is what's likely going to happen, and we can both very quickly get to a point where we know how it's going to turn out.
It's going to save both parties a lot of money and a lot of time and make the process go easier.
And I always say one of my most important jobs as a professional is to manage the expectations of my clients. So it's, how long is this going to take? What's this going to cost? What are the benefits? What can I expect from this? What is this inspector going to say? What do we do about this? And when you're in a FSBO type situation, you, as the person with the professionals on your side, might have all those correct expectations, but the person on the other side might not. And that becomes very difficult to negotiate or even just make it through a deal where there's an expectation. I know I've had clients who are buying from for sale by owner situations where the owner will say, well, we'll sell it to you, but we need to close by the end of the week. Well, that's not realistic. They don't know that. And maybe when they bought a house, that's how things worked. But it's just a little more of a complicated process now.
That is good to know. Thanks, Al. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
A couple weeks ago, we talked about the best time to buy, and the best time to buy is now, but sometimes people are thinking about buying off market. And when we talked to Missy, we talked about the different ways that she has access to that unique inventory with Sell 911. But is the money different? We always talk about managing your money, keeping your budget, and making sure that your money is secure. And today we have Kris Weninger from Fairway Independent Mortgage to help us guide us through that process of how's the money different? How can we pay these people? Before we dive into that, we call it the FSBO, for sale by owner. When we're buying one, what's needed from the money standpoint?
As far as for the money standpoint, we can help anybody out purchasing from anybody. The money is the money, it stays the same. What we would like to kind of, as far as have representation.
Having representation is really important. What if there's issues with the home inspection and you're buying directly on a FSBO? If you have no representation of that real estate agent, it's going to be really tough to get those things fixed.
It is, and the issues that we run into is as far as on the lending side of things, we'll have buyers come and say, hey Kris, this went wrong in the home inspection and I want the seller to fix this here. The seller's not doing nothing. I can't state anything at all. I can't represent it. I'm not a real estate agent. I'm not an attorney. So myself and other lenders run into a situation in this case where we can't say nothing, we can't do anything. It's up to the buyer themselves to negotiate.
What if it's a friend or a neighbor, somebody I know? Does that make it okay, or why would I need all of these people involved if I already know the person?
It gets tricky in saying, hey, you're my friend and we're all going to take care of business, which that I get. The biggest thing is when you take a look at know your terms, know what you're buying. I go back to this story. It was a different loan officer that was at a closing between two friends. Buying a piece of property, very simple, right? Mm-hmm. They're sitting at closing and the buyer goes, I'm so excited because I can't wait to have access to all 5 acres. And the seller's like, wait a minute, I'm only selling you 1 acre. Well, that stopped that closing dead in its tracks, and basically they had to kind of work out all the details, because what are you buying? Know the details.
That goes back to the earlier episode when we talked about when you're buying a home, you're caught up in the moment. You're thinking about how you can use all of those acres, how you can have a barbecue, what you're going to do with it. And you might not look at the details, the contract, the information, and that communication is, you're a neutral party, and so is Missy, and you're not emotionally invested into that barbecue like I am. So having you on my side is so important. A lot of people buy from family members, or there's gift, there's equity. How does that work in the FSBO world?
That's a fun transaction we buy from family members, and not many people know about this, and we do about 6 to 10 of these per year. And if it's between family members, and the key factor is if the seller, if it's not in a trust, if it's owned by a person, they can take a look at selling it to another family member. Now, chances are you're probably going to give them a little bit of a deal. So we can take that, whatever that deal is, and use that as your down payment. A quick example is, and again, I'm just using this for number-wise, if it's a $100,000 purchase price, or if the property is worth $100,000, but you're only going to sell it to your family member for $80,000, you have $20,000 worth of equity. Guess what? That $20,000, that is your down payment. Now, there's certain stipulations that you have to write the contract accordingly, but wow, what a great way to use that equity and keep more money in your pocket.
And the way that you're going to keep money in your pocket is by using that 20% equity. You're going to avoid things like PMI insurance, correct?
Correct. So like I said, it's becoming very popular. So if you do have family members that are looking to sell to another family member, that is a great avenue to take a look at.
Is buying off market different for lending?
As far as on lending, not so much, because we take a look at what we need to know is who do we ask as far as for when the appraiser wants to get through the house, who do we contact for that? Also, who's going to handle the title work for the seller as far as all the transfer paperwork? And if we know those things, we can pretty much run with it and get you closed.
To handle that paperwork and understand all that documentation, would you recommend having someone help you, like an agent, a buyer's agent, or is that something that someone could do on their own?
At the end of the day, it all comes down to what you feel comfortable with. And at the end of the day, as far as do you want representation? Do you want to take a look at as far as for spending X amount of money and in essence to protect your future asset? Because if you're buying anywhere from $50,000, $100,000 to $200,000 to $500,000, spending a little bit of money up front and having that representation, you're going to feel a lot comfortable and sleep better at night.
Protect yourself, protect your assets, and make sure that you have proper representation to make sure that if you're buying off market, you don't end up with one of those houses that's being sold off market for a reason. So it's good to have people on your side. Thank you so much, Kris. I appreciate you helping us out with the Buying Off Market show.
Thank you for having me on, Jon. I appreciate it.
Wonderful.